is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and is brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday friends just like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover some great topics. A bomb through the president's rhetoric, the midterm watch, a special guest we have today, Amy Zachmeyer, from the Houston chapter of the Democratic Socialist of America, and transgender in the Trump generation. And of course, we'll end the show as always with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into the first topic. Andy, for crying out loud, I just mispronounced her name. It's okay. It's okay.
But then transgender came right on top of that. And who are you introducing?
Just mispronounced her name. It's okay. It's all right. A bomb through the president's rhetoric. Caesar Sayoc, a Florida supporter of President Trump, was the man who the FBI apprehended and accused of sending pipe bombs to President Obama, Bill and Hillary Clinton, George Soros, CNN, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Eric Holder, Maxine Waters, Robert De Niro, and a whole host of others. Sayoc targeted only people that President Trump demonized both on Twitter and at his rallies. And I've been saying ever since Donald Trump started running for office that this was going to come back to bite him, that his rhetoric was too caustic, and I was right.
You were. And then if you look at the truck and you look at what Sayoc had plastered all over that van or whatever it was, and the people all have targets on them. I mean,
Could you imagine Republican targets in those targets? You can't. It's hard to flip that script, right? If there was a picture of Pence in a target or Mitch McConnell in a target,
they'd be incensed.
Yes, there were I feel like it's okay to show images of Democrats as the victims of violence, and it's not okay to do it the other way. And the other side has portrayed themselves as victims, and it doesn't flip. The script doesn't flip.
What's so fascinating, though, is that in this day and age, it takes something like this to happen for people to finally wake up and say you just can't be doing this, but he still doesn't get the message.
Right.
And just today, Tom Steyer, who was one of the targets, was on one of the morning talk shows, and Trump immediately started criticizing him in a very caustic manner. He just will not get it.
It's not that he doesn't get it. President Trump thinks that helps him, and that's all. That's what it's all about. He doesn't care that his rhetoric and his tone and his tenor allows people like Sayoc out of the shadows and into the open to try to kill people. He doesn't care, and that's the problem.
Well, if they had just talked to the general manager of the pizza delivery place and found out that she didn't let him deliver pizzas in the daytime because of what his truck had on it, she was like, we wouldn't let him deliver it in the day because it might scare some of our customers off. But Chris, since we started this program, we've been talking about leadership and the lack of it. There's a real void of leadership. And at the moment that we need somebody to really talk about, how we as Americans should be responding to these types of things like bomb scares, people attacking synagogues and actually killing people, we have just the opposite person. We don't have someone saying, hey, as Americans, we should step back and we should all come together around a common cause of decency, really. And we don't have anybody like that, because even though he had a teleprompter speech in front of him when he talked in North Carolina, when he got to, I think it was Illinois, his tone became different. When it became blame the media again.
Right, he immediately
his
attacked
words
the media
became
again.
different.
But also, since the beginning of this show, and we gave you a lot of grief about it because you kept talking about dog whistles that were sent out. And
not this show
I'll
today,
apologize
but
for giving you grief about that, because I
Thank you,
heard
Chris.
a fascinating conversation this morning. I think she's from the New York Times, and they've been talking a great deal about identity politics on NPR. And she was talking about how people just say black voters or Hispanic voters and just group them into one bunch. But then when it gets to white voters, then you're suburban voters and this kind of voter and that kind of voter. But what she said everybody missed during the 2016 election was that all of the dog whistle issues that were being thrown out there to those Trump voters. And it was basically all anti-black.
Yeah,
James Campbell didn't miss him.
He
tried to tell you about
that was a fascinating piece, and I would tell everybody to read it by McKay Coppins in the November issue of The Atlantic, where it talks about how Trump basically stepped into a kind of a cake that had already been baked by the Republican Party that started back as far as 1978 when Newt Gingrich entered politics and basically said that we need to change the tone of the debate and stop acting like Boy Scouts. And Trump heard that, and maybe he didn't because I know he didn't read it.
Somebody told him about it.
Yeah, but he stepped into the middle of this cake and maybe put the icing on it, because now we don't have leadership from the Republican Party. What we have is tacit agreement with Trump and his tactics, because nobody is willing to call him on his BS.
And we still don't. I mean, the White House and the president and the GOP leadership are still saying the president bears no blame for what's happening in the country. And I want you to think about it. In 1 week, you had SAOC sending bombs to all of these people. You had a shooting at the
synagogue in Pittsburgh.
At the synagogue, and then at the store, you had a white nationalist go in and shoot 3 black people, 3 African Americans at the store, all in 1 week. And the GOP, the president, and the White House all say the president bears no responsibility for this.
He's made it completely acceptable, and it's something that I've been preaching for a long time, and don't understand when you allow people to go on right-wing radio and say racist things repeatedly because people think they're funny. You are sending a message to folks that that's okay. When you have a president of the United States who talks the way that he does, you send a message. He has the tallest bully pulpit in all of the world. He sends a message that that's okay. And that's it hasn't been okay to be racist in this country for a long time in any kind of polite society, but apparently in dark corners, it was all still perfectly fine.
Is it okay to call people deplorables now? Are we okay with that now?
At least 3 of them. The GOP, Andy, is now trying to draw this moral equivalence to what happened to Steve Scalise when I can't remember the guy who did it, but the shooting of Steve Scalise by that Bernie Sanders supporter, and saying that nobody's vilifying Bernie Sanders for that. And they're trying to draw some moral equivalence there.
I don't understand that. I mean, Bernie Sanders isn't calling for the same sort of violence. There are so many instances that you can point to at Trump at his rallies with the locker up chants. I love it when they carry guys out on stretchers back in those days, where advocating don't be gentle with them, putting a person into a police car, a black person into a police car. I wish somebody would just punch him in the face. I mean, these are all things that he said at his rallies. So I've never heard Bernie Sanders make any statement even close to that.
But like the typical schoolyard bully, he talks in as caustic a fashion as he possibly can. Bernie Sanders ran on ideas and had followers. Just because one's a screwball and goes out and shoots somebody, horribly tragic and very unfortunate. But if that is what had occurred here, of course there would be no blame with the president. But when the guy has placated his car with all of the people that Donald Trump has purposely made targets of his rhetoric, it's a completely different scenario altogether.
And the day after the attack, the president goes right back to attacking the media.
Of course.
Right back to attacking the media. He comes out and reads the teleprompter saying that the country needs to stop the political division in the country, and then goes right into attacking the media in the next sentence. It's not the presidential way to handle this, and that's the problem. That's the problem he has. He won't own up to what he has to do to be a president.
That's absolutely true. And Chris, when I think about this in terms of the tone and the tenor that Donald Trump sets for the country. I think about the civil rights movement when Bull Connors, the police commissioner of Birmingham, used to say, we have to keep these birds separated so we know who to whip. We had George Wallace saying segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That sets a tone and a tenor that feeds into a frenzy and has these people who are blatant racists, go out and do crazy things. But fortunately, during that time, we had moral leadership from the top.
Right.
That basically said, this is not okay. And if it wasn't for the media turning the cameras on those people who were attacking peaceful people marching in Birmingham, Alabama for their rights, then, who knows where we'd be as a country. But now we have the cameras turned on. It was ironic when I saw the pictures that I sent to y'all in the Chronicle of the Trump rally in Houston earlier last week. And, these people were out there in their Trump Make America Great Again regalia, and Jones, what's the guy name on the Alex Jones was out there with a bullhorn. They had one of the porta potties was plastered with Democratic voting booth. It's just that
right.
kind
But the media,
of rhetoric.
but it took a long time for the media to come out and do what they needed to do in the 60s and the age of protest. And I think what we're getting down to, the media is going to have to start calling it what it is.
Right, and that's
this
exactly
has become pure racism.
Robert,
and we can't keep speaking in hushed tones about it and trying to pretend that it's something else.
And we can't
a lot of this is driven by race.
And society cannot allow the president not to own up to what he's done here. Robert Bowers, the man who attacked the synagogue in Pittsburgh, killed 11 people, injured 6, on his social media page, Gab, G-A-B, used by white supremacists. I'd never even heard of this until today when I was reading up on this. This Gab social media page that white supremacists use, he had on his page, Trump is a globalist, not a nationalist. The user posted after the rally in which Trump declared himself a nationalist. Trump has repeatedly slammed globalists in his public rhetoric, despite warnings that the term is understood to mean Jews in anti-Semitic circles. There is no "Make America Great Again" as long as there is a K infestation. I'm not going to say that word even on a podcast where I can say it. This guy is as crazy as they get, and he was a Trump follower, and when the president says the things he does, he lets these people, he gives them permission.
But Chris Tritico, when the president comes out after Charlottesville, when the violence was clearly against the protesters, and says there was good people on both sides. Fine people among them.
That's right.
Even a guy who ran over the woman and killed her. And that's the kind of stuff that you have to call out as absolutely abhorrent.
That's right.
And wrong.
That's right.
The difference today compared to the example that you brought up with Bull Connor and the Freedom Riders and during the Civil Rights Movement is that we have a very fractured media now. So there's a part of the country that's watching news that is favorable to Donald Trump, and then there's the other part of the country that's watching the so-called mainstream media or reading, and so we're not even getting the same information. In the 60s, everybody was watching Walter Cronkite and the 3 different news channels and the their local papers that either maybe they did or didn't cover the issues in the South, but at least on television where they were seeing the images, we were all seeing the same images, and now we're just seeing whatever we already agree with.
You can watch only that agrees with you and never get the other side and get tied into that and stay in your own little world.
But
it's a real problem for the country.
But when I talk about the dog whistle is on display every morning in terms of Trump's Twitter feed. I mean, the media can report it fairly and accurately as they want, but Trump's going to go on Twitter and say whatever he wants, and that speaks to his base.
Right.
And it actually speaks to the American people as well, because the media is reporting that, because the media now follows what the president does and says on Twitter. And we don't know if he'll say, well, this is what I mean, and then he'll try to walk it back like he did the nationalist term. But Chris, it's Twitter.
But there needs to be a whole new focus on these issues. And my fear had always been that when we had to place so much attention or pay so much attention to international terrorism that we would lose sight of domestic terrorism. Chris Tritico, you said something interesting, that you had never heard of GAB. I've never heard of GAB, but I assure you the Southern Poverty Law Center has heard of GAB, and they've probably tracked it. And I think a lot of people in the mainstream media probably know about these hate groups, and they're going to have to start paying more attention to them because they've been allowed to operate in the shadows, and that's where this type of hatred is nurtured. And it's going to lead to more and more of these types of incidents if we don't get serious about really finding out who's involved.
But Chris, I want to make one final point. The guy who sent the bombs was basically apolitical until he found what his former lawyer said, a father
figure in Donald Trump. Right. I'm glad. Thank you. I was going to point that out.
Like Kanye West found a father figure, but Kanye, I hope, doesn't go out and do something insane. But people are buying this rhetoric. People who were apolitical, Chris, and now they're hearing the dog whistle.
Right.
Which I'm bringing back the dog whistle, man.
You had to do it, Chris. You had to unleash the dog whistle. I hope you're happy.
We need to get some What's Left America dog whistles for
That's
sure.
Exactly right.
We had to listen to that for months, and you unleashed it again. We had put it up. I hope you're happy.
If James will start modeling dog whistles, humans can't hear them.
All right, we're going to move on. Midterm watch. We got a special guest, Amy Zachmeyer. I brutalized her name at first, and I apologize for that. Amy Zachmeyer is a regional labor and socialist organizer focusing on workers' rights, health care, and social justice. Amy serves as the co-chair of the Houston Democratic Socialists of America and is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America Organizing Committee for Medicare for All, for the Medicare for All campaign, and Medicare for All campaign.
Easy for you to say.
No kidding. Amy, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
All right, so why don't you just start out? Tell us, what is a Democratic Socialist?
So the Democratic Socialists of America, we organize under what we would call a big tent. Anyone who is aware of, leftist politics at all knows that people really like to get down into the philosophy and really define exactly what is socialism and who said it best. Was it Marx or Mao or something else? And or Michael Harrington, who is one of the founders of the Democratic Socialists of America. And what we really believe is that, we're here in the United States of America and we're living in 2018. And we have things that are going on in this country right now. And there are a lot of leftist opinions about how to best address those things. But really the idea is that we are basically we're there for radical democracy. We believe in people having a say in their government, in their workplaces, in their own lives in a big way. We are specifically anti-capitalist. We do believe in worker control of the means of production. But for the most part, what we organize around is social justice in the sense that, we believe that we should have a healthy earth to live on and that the earth is for everyone. We believe in personal freedoms and that, you shouldn't be being put in prison over
barbecuing in a public park.
Absolutely. We believe in the issues that are going on today. We have a lot of work to do before we start fighting about, the difference between
Where do you think the newfound acceptance is coming from? You were saying before we went on the air that just not too many years ago, some politicians would shy away from even having their picture taken with
Runaway was the word you used.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously with the congressional race in New York and other things that we're seeing around the country, things are changing. And what do you think has led to that?
Well, two things. I think that a lot of great people need to get a lot of credit for all the organizing work that we did. I think we talk about these like overarching things that like, just differences in experience with the Cold War and like that kind of thing. Like millennials are definitely a lot more open to the word socialism than their parents. I'm a millennial, but people don't believe me because I'm 34, but I am a millennial.
It's a little cuspy.
Yeah, I'm on the cusp. One of the comedians I really like has like a thing called elder millennial, and everything that she said, I like literally said, I was like, oh,
Elder millennial.
I'm an elder millennial.
I like that.
I didn't always have a cell phone, right? But I am old enough that I remember the Cold War. And I remember the very end, right? And so basically, we haven't grown up with this fear of a totalitarian government coming and like taking away our American way of life. And so because of that, we're able to actually look at the real definition of what socialism is and not the connotation behind it, meaning that, if you support socialism, you must support Stalin. I don't personally think Stalin was a great dude, and I don't really want our government to start looking like Stalinism. And so I think that that's been a lot of it. I think the word always has meant a economy in which the means of production is controlled by the worker, and then it's got all this other stuff tied into it based on like historical context, and also let's be very honest,
authoritarian governments.
Yeah, authoritarian governments, but also the propaganda of the United States in the Cold War.
Well,
like we do have to be honest about that.
Historically, there's never been an experiment in socialism that panned out the way the model worked.
Right. And so, my question is like, do you think that the way things are working right now, like the economic system that we currently have is actually working, or you just think that it's not in utter chaos? And do you think that the ills of capitalism were a big contributing factor in the failure of these things?
All right.
Well, what do you think about the Scandinavian model? I mean, they've got a working model in which the capitalism is still the driver of the economy. Thank you. But also there's an idea that there should be a social safety net because everyone can't. And so that everyone is raised up to at least a baseline level, and they've got a pretty good society there. Is that anything?
So we think that's better. And a lot of people from the left actually like criticize Bernie Sanders because they're like, oh, he's not a real socialist, he's a social democrat, which is something different. And I think that those countries are really more social democracies, like they are, because they still do function under free market capitalism, But we also do see things in those countries where, you have like certain national resources that have been nationalized, and that's how they pay for a lot of those things. And so I think that a world where we move farther in that direction would be better. But I don't think.
How do you solve the problems that millennials are talking about when they support Bernie Sanders and socialism, like the high student loan debt load and health care and affordable housing and a living wage? What does socialism do to address those problems?
I think that socialism, and rather than looking at like the needs of just literally like the needs of like the economy in the sense of like our shareholders getting their money, so we would have a radical shift to where we're looking at like what does our society need to function, and society functioning wouldn't be measured by the Dow Jones or whatever. I don't even know the names of them. I don't have stocks or anything, but you know what I mean? Like we wouldn't be looking at like stock market indexes to decide whether or not our society is functioning in a healthy way. We would be looking at the people around us and saying like, are millennials drowning in student debt? Oh, they are. Probably shouldn't be that way. We should probably do something to address that. And it wouldn't be like, well, what's that going to mean for the banks though? Sorry, the banks probably shouldn't have bankrupted an entire generation with student debt. Oops.
But I think one fear some have is that, and you raised it, you said some people were upset with Bernie Sanders because he wasn't a true socialist. And is there going to be some kind of purity test on the Democratic Party for who's socialist enough?
In the Democratic Party?
Well, that brings up a great question I've been trying to ask.
Do you all consider yourselves
is the
part of the
Democratic Socialist a new party, or is it a party within the Democratic Party?
We are specifically not a party. We're just considered a political organization. So we organize around politics, around, political work. Some of that work is electoral. Sometimes we do work within the Democratic Party, but a good portion of our work is outside of the Democratic Party. For example, here in Houston, we did a huge Harvey relief effort. I mean, it was we raised some money. We went out and physically did the work of helping people. We're continuing to do that, and so we are in general just trying to build a better world, and it's not all tied within electoral politics.
So y'all aren't organizing candidates to run for office.
We do endorse candidates, and then people in DSA volunteer to go work for candidates for sure. We endorsed a handful here locally.
I saw that on your webpage, by the way.
Yeah.
And do y'all work closely with the Republican Socialist Organization?
They
That was humor.
Well, I was going to say, usually they're a very different kind of socialist on that side. They put that, instead of Democrat, they put the word national in front of it. And we do not want anything to do with those people. And they really hate us, actually. They threaten us a lot.
Really?
Oh. So I want to ask, you talked about, you're on the Medicare for All committee, and how do you intend, talk about how you want to pay for that.
Well, I mean, if you just look at our economy, or if you look at our budget right now, there's so much in there that the socialists don't believe that should be there. And we just believe in a functioning government that you meet the needs of your people. So, I mean, there are lots of ways to pay for it. On the one hand, I'm not a legislator. It's not my job.
I know, I'm not
develop
arguing with
budget.
you. I just want to know how you...
No, but I'm just, a lot of people ask me that question. I'm just kind of like, we'll figure it out. We pay for wars we can't afford all the time. So we'll figure it out. But honestly, I believe that people at the top should be paying their fair share. I think that the taxes, like the Trump tax cut was an atrocity, and I think that
we're all in agreement with that.
and so we would undo that and then some, right?
Do you think that the general public, in the United States, is ready to elect someone that has the name socialist attached to them?
I think that we're getting there. Yes, I do. I think that when people, Bernie Sanders was wildly popular. And I'm not here to rehash that. And I'd be like, nope, we're not having that conversation about what would have happened.
Yeah, we weren't going to go there, but
That being said, given the negative connotations and negative feelings a lot of people have about socialism, and since you all certainly are trying to do some very positive work, does anyone ever bring up the idea that maybe we should call ourselves something else?
Not anymore. No.
Yeah, I think that this goes to something that I've said to, on the pod before, which is that I think younger people just have a different idea about what socialism is. They have a different view, and they're willing to look at it with open eyes. But I think that what would, just like the Chris's sort of asked, one or both, is it part of the Democratic Party? Well, it's not part of the Democratic Party, but the question still has come up and will come up about how you'd split the vote. So a lot of Democrats would, a lot of the things that the social Democrats believe in would have. Oh wait, I didn't say that right, did I?
No, you're right.
Democratic Socialists.
Thank you.
Right.
Would be things that a lot of Democrats would be for, and I think it comes to the There's a question for people: what is a liberal? What is a progressive? What is a leftist? What is I already said liberal.
Yeah.
And so we're slicing and dicing, but are we just dividing up a pie that is going to keep us from being able to get candidates elected to office, where we can actually implement some of these policies?
I would say this about that. I think that if anything, the Democratic Socialists bring out votes for Democrats. I think that we've given people a reason to get active, people who were previously disengaged because they felt that neither party represented them or cared about them. And so I think that, maybe you did have people who were DSA members who voted for Jill Stein, right? That I'm sure, I know that for a fact. I don't think those people would have voted anyway.
At all.
And here's the thing, is they wouldn't have voted at all. And that means that they wouldn't have gone to vote for any of those down ballot people either. And so by getting people like that more politically engaged in electoral politics, we really do bring something to the table for the Democrats. And we don't go in trying to, start a fight. We're not trying to continue to have the Bernie Hillary fight. That's over. There are individuals who do, but that's true on both sides for sure. And I think that we're building a political movement that is getting people who were otherwise disengaged engaged. And I think that can only benefit the Democrats if the Democrats are willing to
open to talk.
And will there be purity tests? Okay, we've all gotten in political arguments with people before where we really stand our ground and we're like, I absolutely, you turn red in the face and you absolutely disagree. But at the end
Speak for yourself, Amy. I have never done anything of the sort.
But at the end of the day, I went and voted for Hillary, right? And so, y'all don't know that, but I did. So at the end of the day, we are trying to do something good together, and we are definitely in opposition to the Trump administration agenda. And so we might disagree with it otherwise, but hey, there are more people talking about it, and I think that's a really great thing.
And I'll tell you my concern, and we've talked about this on the show many times, is that there's a whole host of people in the middle of the country that are looking for a home. And when you tie the name socialism to the Democratic Party, I fear that those people in the middle that are looking for a home get afraid of the Democratic Party and say, we can't go there.
But I wonder, are you tying it to the Democratic Party? I think it's just a matter of people falling into a bucket because we overlap on a lot of issues, as opposed to
that may
the
be.
Democrats saying.
And I think that's what Amy's saying.
I have a really good answer to this. The Democrats have been calling people in the not the Democrats. The Republicans have been calling people in the Democratic Party socialists for a long time. I remember being I had already started dipping my toes into socialism whenever President Obama was running, and they kept being he's a socialist, and just really going off about it. And I was kind of I'm going to vote for him. I support him, but he is not a socialist like me. He doesn't believe in the things that I believe in that way.
Not, yeah.
And so I think that that's where we are on that to the first, we're already getting punished for that. So we might as well just live our values.
Might as well own it.
Yeah. And then two, we are, I think that you would actually be really surprised how many people are not turned off by that. And I worried about that when I was first organizing. I really did. I would, debate on whether or not we should put our name on events we were planning in coalition and that kind of thing. And now I always put my name on something. If we're doing the work, then we should, all organizations who do the work should get credit for it, right? But that being said, with the Medicare for All working group, we knock on doors to talk to people about Medicare for All. And we walked up and knock on people's door. And we say, they're working class people, regular everyday people. And some of them are not engaged voters. And we say, hi, we're with the Democratic Socialists of America to talk to you. And we've not once ever had somebody who is probably in the group that you've described really freak out on us. We've had a couple of people, but they were generally very clearly, you could tell from their home, already politically engaged, either hard centrist Dems or
moderate Republicans,
or we're just Republicans because we knock on all doors. So I think
even yards that have Ted Cruz signs in front of them.
So there's been a study that showed that we haven't done it since the signs have been up because Ted Cruz didn't have signs forever, but we knock on with a group. We take two people. We're in pairs, but we knock on all doors. But 70% of people in America support Medicare for All. So
they just don't know that they do.
And you talked about some of your beliefs and things y'all feel strongly about. You talked about personal freedom, but just kind of wrap this up. Where are y'all on personal hygiene?
Are you asking if you'll have to share your toothbrush after the revolution? No. We believe in personal hygiene. We want to.
I think that's important.
It is. It's good.
That's a common bond.
It is. Yeah. And just to be very clear, under socialism, there's a difference between private property and personal property. So people want to talk about abolishing private property like on the far left all the time, but that does not mean you have to share your toothbrush.
Good to know.
Amy Zachmeyer, thank you
Thanks,
so
Amy.
much for joining us today.
Thank
That
you,
was
Amy.
actually a very good conversation. I'm glad you came in. Thank you so much. All right, that was a great interview. I'm glad you brought her in, Andy. That was really informative.
Thank
I
you.
liked it.
We can have
She didn't
more
change
like
my
her.
mind, Andy, but I liked it.
We need more women around here anyway.
We really do. Maybe a nice one.
That's another subject.
It doesn't sound right when you say it, Cordell.
All right, just a couple of more points on the midterms that we got to go through real quick. But President Trump last week straight up lied about a 10% tax decrease that he was going to have Congress push through before the midterm election. Only problem with that lie was Congress is not in session before the election.
Of course, they go home to run for re-election.
It was just a lie.
But Chris, he was at one of his rallies, and you act like people at his rally don't believe everything that he says.
I don't think he said that at a rally.
Yes, he did.
Was
He
that at
said-
a rally?
He said
Well,
it
he
at a
tweeted
rally.
it, and
No,
he said it at a rally.
He
and
said
that
it
was not at a rally.
He
the,
said it
the
at a
fact of the matter
rally.
is, the press is covering the president's Twitter feed. So whatever he says on Twitter, we're covering the press.
But you're
Covering
You
the
just
rallies
need to focus
and-
on Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell was completely honest. He said they're going to try to do away with Medicare and Social Security. That was true. They are going to do that.
that was
They
true.
are not going
And I don't
to
know why.
pass another
I have
tax
heard
cut.
no Democrat bringing that up. And why, I don't know. I would be all over that. I would have ads out on it. I don't understand it.
Well, it was brought up. I think it came out of left field, sort of, so nobody really jumped on it. But
Right field.
One of our local candidates, I know Lizzie Fletcher, has been talking about it.
Well, it ought to be all over the country. All right, last thing I want to talk about, the health insurance Affordable Care Act. The market is opening up, and I just saw this today, and I sent it out to y'all, but y'all don't read my stuff, so it doesn't matter. I'm going
We
to bring
read
it up.
every word.
Yeah, right.
Every word.
If you put
Live and die
spaces
by
between
your words.
some of the paragraphs,
The
that would
Trump
help.
administration cut the funding for the navigators who help people buy insurance through the Affordable Care Act by 80%. When the marketplace opens up in a few days, there will be less people to help people navigate through the webpage to buy health insurance through the marketplace. They also opened up the marketplace to new short-term insurance plans that no longer have to cover pre-existing medical conditions. So there's more plans. The short-term plans without pre-existing medical conditions will be much, much cheaper than the plans, of course, that cover pre-existing medical conditions, but no one to help them navigate through this.
But it's going to be interesting to see
what
what
you're
effect
saying
that has
is the
because they have.
Republicans. Go ahead.
No, y'all talking at the
Go
same
ahead.
It's going
time.
to be interesting to see.
It'll
like
cut
a
down on
choir.
the
I think it's going
length.
to be interesting to see what happens because so many people know how to navigate through the system already. Plus, we've had word of mouth over the years. It's obviously the Republicans are waking up to the fact that they're on the wrong side of this, that people like the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to watch where it goes.
Well, I just think it's a horrible fraud.
I think that the Republicans have learned from their voter suppression tactics with gerrymandering and the exact, I don't remember exactly what they call this, but the exact match ID form where your voter registration card has to exactly to the, every whit, every dot has to match on your driver's license or whatever form of ID that you use, and all the other ways that they suppress voting. They're just applying it to all the programs that they want to do away with that they can't manage to do legislatively because they know that their voters support these programs. And so and abortion, that's another one. Parental consent, and your clinic has to be hospital grade level, and they just nickel and dime the programs that they don't like to death, and they don't have to cast a vote that they would have a record of,
Right.
and they just learned the drill pretty well. I wish the Democrats could be as good on messaging and strategy as the Republicans, to tell you the truth.
You're absolutely right, but they do have a record. They voted to kill the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, 117 times.
Yes.
And are
At
running
least, and counting.
But they're running right now on a campaign that they are saving the pre-existing conditions, which
Yes.
they killed.
Yes, absolutely, and that's the point I was going to make at the
Right.
beginning of this. The Republicans,
nobody will let you.
Yeah, I know. Y'all always
It's like a
kill,
dog whistle.
Y'all kill my dog whistle. But the point I was trying to make is the Republican take it away, and they take it away,
Right.
and then they suggest that they're trying to fight for it, which is totally hypocritical.
Right. As they are.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Trump has let them understand that it's okay to lie. Just say whatever you want to say. It doesn't really
It
matter.
doesn't matter. That's right.
And that's true.
That's exactly right. All right, let's
And it
move
really
on.
goes back to that song. Why do people lie? If you think about it,
Who? What song is that?
Kenny Loggins.
Unfamiliar.
I'll bring it next week.
Yeah, please do.
I think
Is that a
All
Cracker
right.
Barrel tune?
Let's move on. We're moving on. We're moving on. Transgender.
Maybe Keegan can work it into the broadcast.
Transgender.
I think we should have a sample.
All right, we're moving on. Transgender in the Trump generation. The Trump administration is considering a narrowly defining gender as a biological, immutable condition determined by genitalia at birth. The most drastic move yet in a government-wide effort to roll back recognition and protections of transgender people under federal civil rights law. This is a direct assault on a series of decisions by the Obama administration which loosened the legal concept of gender in federal programs, including in education and healthcare, recognizing gender largely as an individual's choice and not determined by sex assigned at birth. Obama's policy promoted fights, litigation, and legislation over bathrooms, dormitories, single-sex programs, and other arenas. And the Trump administration, of course, on their never-ending assault on the Obama administration, is going to roll this back to where if they have to, they'll do a DNA test.
And
Well, just like they called the Obamacare, I hope people will call this Trump gender relation.
Well, that's got a ring to it. That's
It's-
gonna catch on.
I don't think that's going to catch on.
Wait, I don't know.
Catchy.
It's not quite as catchy.
So, Chris,
James, I won't speak over you this
Well,
time. Let's hear what you have to
but
say.
I'm concerned because I want to know, what does Bruce Jenner think about this?
Oh my God, that was so Caitlyn.
Caitlyn Jenner thinks about
Dude,
this. But
look, I thought that was hilarious. It was like when they came for me, a black person. No one. Oh, how's that go?
yeah.
Kind of
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, you
That
know.
was
And then
close.
they came for Caitlyn, and she's like, "Oh my God!"
Well, you know, in all
this isn't
in all
funny.
seriousness,
It's not funny.
In all seriousness, one of the signs that I saw at that Trump rally in Houston was LBGQ. LG.
You don't have to say them in order. You can say them in any order.
LGBTQ.
LBGQ.
LGBTQ.
LBGTQ.
And there are a lot of other letters, some have.
Also wrong.
But when I saw that for Trump, that was just ironic to me.
Was that
Those
true?
are bots.
I thought you were
Those are
kidding
Russian
about
bots.
No,
those
no,
are
no.
Russian bots. Those are not real. Don't pay any attention to that. I saw
No,
a picture
no,
of
no,
a
no.
black
I
man
saw a
dressed in
picture-
a Spider-Man suit, clinging to the side of a bus, holding a fried chicken leg in one hand. And he was a black man, major Trump supporter. Blah blah. That is a bot. That
promise
is not
you-
real.
I promise you they're printing those signs and they're paying people to hold them.
Yeah.
Let me back up. This was a woman who was at Trump's rally that the Chronicle took a picture of.
They're printing those signs and
well,
they're
hold on,
paying people to hold them.
Because Andy just brought it up a little while ago, the way, they always are trying to find new ways to work their message into the standard dialogue. And they did it with abortion. They did it with gay people for years. And they realized too many people know gay people now. And so they're no longer a good target.
But
And
now they've
people who
discovered
have so many friends, they have
transgender.
But
children,
Chris,
of
in all
course. So now
serious-
people don't know very much about the transgendered population, and so they're a perfect target. And that's what the folks in the Republican Party have always done.
well, back to your
Identify
original
the folks that
premise,
you
Chris.
People don't know, so that they will be fearful of
And
them,
yeah, it's so
and
scary.
make them the target.
Yes,
But
it's like
Chris-
don't pay no
Strategy
attention
has
to the
been for
man
years.
behind the curtain.
Chris, back to your original premise. The thing that people should be concerned about is this is probably going to go to the Supreme Court, and it's going to get codified by Supreme Court that basically supports Donald Trump.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, we'll
and they
see.
might actually have an intelligent discussion about this, and it is something that's becoming more and more confusing and more commonplace.
Why do you think there would be that? Why
well,
do you think that?
we don't know yet.
We don't
if
know,
Kavanaugh
but
is
everything that we have seen from November 2016 has been our worst fear, our worst nightmare. But we still hold out hope somehow that the Supreme Court is not going to do the bidding of the far right wing.
But the reason I brought this up is that this is another in a long string of complete reversals of what Donald Trump ran on.
Yeah, he said that wasn't even really an issue. to
Right,
him.
right. And he promised he would not do this, and this is another complete reversal of a campaign promise that Donald Trump made.
Yeah, okay, so it goes back to what I talked about earlier and how Newt Gingrich changed the Republican Party fundamentally in the way they message things. And Republicans are not going to talk about these types of issues in terms of policy. They're going to talk about it in terms of scare tactics.
Right.
And so do you want your daughter going into a restroom where a guy might
Dressed
be?
as a woman.
Yeah. And so, they aren't arguing policy, Chris. They're arguing culture. They're arguing race. They're arguing everything that makes people afraid of the other.
Right.
And
That's
so
exactly right.
My point made. I'll just shut the hell up.
The other side of that is that they're saying that there's a certain kind of white, wholesome, traditional American value that we want to uphold. So it makes a lot of people other. It just lumps everyone who doesn't fit that mold as other. And so it's not just dangerous for people that the country's trying to get their mind around, like, oh, transgender. Well, I don't understand that. I mean, either you're a guy or you're a girl. Well, they're not the only other. We're all other unless we fit that mold. Church-going, white, wholesome American
Well,
traditional
I
family
had missed
values.
it. Y'all probably didn't, but I stumbled across it online looking for something else. Pete Davidson's from SNL take on the bathroom bill stuff that was going around the country. And if you haven't seen it, it's worth looking up because it says, I don't understand. I don't really get this because I just don't think these people are spending thousands of dollars on hormone treatments for painful operations and complicated operations just so that they can go in and see a woman pee. He said, I grew up with my mom and my sister. Take it from me. It's not worth it.
All right, let's move on into out of left field, and I'll go first today. I've been talking about this for a very, very long time, and Andy and Chris came with me a week ago when I moderated a First Amendment free speech forum at the best university in Texas that we've all agreed is Sam Houston State University. And I said at that time when we were talking about President Trump, I said, doesn't the president owe a greater duty to the First Amendment than the rest of us because his words have meaning? I didn't know at the time that a person who listens to him would do what happened, and that pipe bombs would be mailed around the country, and that a crazy person would murder 11 people at a synagogue, or someone would walk into a store and kill 3 African Americans. But turns out I was right. So, President Trump, I want to talk to you, and I want to tell you that your words have meanings. Your acts have meaning. People say that you have the biggest bully pulpit in the world, but it's not a bully pulpit. It's just a pulpit. And when you stand and speak, there's at least 1 billion people listening. And some of those people are crazy. And when you stand and proudly say you're a nationalist, you allow those who have been living in the shadows, who are nationalists themselves, to come out of the shadows and send pipe bombs around, and they take their guns and go in and murder people because you gave them the permission to do it. And you have to own those words and own your acts, and you have to stand up, and you have to be a president. Being presidential is more than mere platitudes, and it's more than one-off statements. Today I was reminded of John F. Kennedy's speech that he never gave on November 23rd of 1963, and I just want to read the last 3 paragraphs. Almost everywhere we look, the story is the same in Latin America and Africa and Asia, in the councils of the world and in the jungles of far-off nations. There is now renewed confidence in our country and in our convictions. For this country is moving, and it must not stop. It cannot stop. For this is time for courage, and it is time for challenge. Neither conformity nor complacency will do. Neither the fanatics nor the faint-hearted are needed. And our duty as a party is not to our party alone, but to the nation, and indeed to all mankind. Our duty is not merely to the preservation of political power, but to the preservation of peace and freedom. So let us not be the petty when our cause is so great. Let us not quarrel amongst ourselves when our nation's future is at stake. Let us stand together with renewed confidence in our cause, united in our heritage of the past and of our hopes for the future, and determined that this land we love shall lead all mankind into the frontiers of peace and abundance. Mr. President, please be a president. Please be a president.
How about? Never mind.
Chris, that was very profound, and I'm going to kind of piggyback on that theme today. I talked earlier about how tone and tenor matters in terms of what the president says, and I had an anecdote for that was Bull Connor, who's the police commissioner of Birmingham, who basically justified sicking dogs on peaceful protesters. And I'm reminded of George Wallace, who said, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. I'm not naive enough to think that tolerance and civility and goodwill can be legislated. It can't. I think that the tacit silence and agreement by default of the GOP in not calling this president on his rhetoric is a shame for this country. I think when you see a guy send package bombs to members of the Democratic Party that were no Republicans targeted, that Donald Trump Jr. and his wife received some powder in the mail from somebody, and I don't agree with that. But when you have a president who set a tone and a tenor in this country, and you have a party that basically, by saying nothing about it, basically agrees that zero-sum game and winning is the only thing that matters. And I think in America we're better than that. It's not about killing people or harming people to get what you want. And you don't have to do that in this country. That's out of my left field. That's my left field. Out of left field.
Andy?
Oh, no, you go.
Well, I want to talk about what became a national story in 2017, the tropical storm Hurricane Harvey that brought so much water into Houston. That was actually our third flood for my wife and I at our home. And so we put it on the market, and after a great deal of time, we were finally able to sell it, and we closed on it this week. And yesterday I wrote these remarks and posted them on Facebook, but I wanted to share them here on Out of Left Field on the podcast because I don't want people to ever forget what folks go through when you don't pay attention to infrastructure, when you don't do what's necessary to protect citizens, and when you have a rash of flooding like we've experienced here in Houston, and you're really seeing all across the country this year with Hurricane Michael and other hurricanes. So you're sitting on your patio with neighbors on a beautiful spring day in 2015, drinking wine and telling them how you will probably never buy another car because your convertible is so perfect. Then you watch the Rockets get eliminated from the playoffs and go to bed, and then one of your dogs wakes you up and you step into water that you realize is rushing into your home. Your wife is not there because she's out helping a friend whose car has died. And since you've never been through anything like this, you have no idea what to do. So you begin grabbing a few things here and there, but really can't think straight. And you're mostly concerned about getting the dogs to safety upstairs. So that's what you do. And over the next few hours, your life is turned upside down and 3 feet of water comes into your house. And the car you were never going to replace is completely submerged in the street. You don't know it, but you have been set upon what will be a 3-year journey with 2 more floods, 2 complete home repair jobs, and a slew of anxiety, fear, depression, anger, guilt, and embarrassment. The last day you spend in your home, you will be taken away by boat. And then after you finally decide enough is enough and start trying to sell your house as is, you must accept the reality that your most valuable possession is really no longer very valuable and is just a giant albatross that you want off of you. And then the day comes like yesterday when you finally close because you've been helped by Janet Friedman, a mortgage specialist, and Lisa Kornhauser, your realtor, 2 of the finest, most wonderful human beings you could ever hope to meet. And you go by one last time, and there's the giant pile of remaining stuff you took out a couple of days before, and the magnolia tree that you planted that was only as tall as you, but now reaches to the roof. And you think to yourself, this awful journey is finally over. That's my out of left field.
My out of left field,
You gotta
was
lighten
saving.
it up. Please let it be light.
It's going to be so light that it will be ephemeral because I was everything that we talked about today. I was like, no, don't talk about that because you're going to save that for out of left field. And now, of course, I cannot remember.
And that's your out of left field.
And that's my out of left field.
You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have this week. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. More important than that, we need you to do what, Andy?
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
And go vote.
Go
Subscribe.
vote.
Go
Yes.
vote wherever
vote.
you live.
That's right.
Early voting has started everywhere.
That's right.
Ends at different times, but
It
election
ends
day
on
is
Nov-
November 6th, and people need to be focused on that and knock on doors and work for candidates. People have phone banks going in every election headquarters in every state in this country, so volunteer. People need you.
Much thanks to Vertical Ascension Entertainment for videotaping us, or what do we call it, to digitizing our show. It'll be up on YouTube shortly. Digitized. Keegan DeLay, our in-studio producer. We'll see you next